Oh my gosh, 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 I cannot believe I'm gonna finally collab with Brony Curious. Freaking Brony Curious wants to collab with me. Oh, I cannot wait to do this. This is gonna be so great. This is gonna be so awesome. And he's here. Oh my gosh, 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 oh my god. Okay, just keep it together. You've only been waiting for this since you became a pronounced dude. Alright. And we... Wait, who are you?
I'm Sketchy. Sketchy the Changeling. Nice to meet you, Toon.
I have several questions, and in no particular order, starting with how the hell did you get into my channel?
Well, I figured that if I wanted to get more watchers, I should be featured on more popular YouTube channels, and posing as a big-time brony YouTuber was the most foolproof plan I could come up with. Next question?
You've raised my hopes and dashed them quite expertly. Brilliant, sir. Brilliant. Okay. So, what's to stop me from using my Gabby revolver and turning you into a changeling shish kebab?
My charming good looks and irresistible charisma?
That is a lie, and you are a liar for saying that. If anyone has the good looks and charisma, it's me.
Really now? Ooh, look at me, I'm ToonKritic. My hat gives me super strength. I'm so cool despite being a red and black OC.
Alright. Okay. You know what? Strike that. No more changeling shish kebab. I'm having my changeling medium rare.
Whoa, brother. Calm down. I think we can both benefit from a collaboration. You've been keeping up with the MLP comics, so I assume you've heard of the miniseries Fiendship is Magic, right?
Yes. Why?
Well, on my channel, I review the comics regularly, and I think it'd be cool to discuss this particular miniseries with someone that's also read through it, considering how much these comics contribute to the characters they feature. Sound interesting?
I suppose not. I do enjoy the villains of MLP, and to see them finally get their own series, I think there's some potential. Why not?
Perfect. Let's get started, shall we? As Toon previously mentioned, Fiendship is Magic is a short series of single-issue stories that give some insight into the major villains of MLP. These 5 issues were released every Wednesday in April with the likes of Katie Cook, Heather Newford, Jeremy Whitley, among others, writing each individual issue.
With quite a rogues gallery to choose from, there's plenty of potential to explore backstories and give answers to questions fans have wondered since these villains were created. Thus, we are given the stories of King Sombra, Tyrek, the Sirens, Nightmare Moon, and ending it all off with Queen Chrysalis. Surprisingly, no Discord issue. That's a main complaint I hear.
Meh, it didn't really bother me. While I do like Discord and all, I'm not too interested in his backstory. Well, not as much as those of the other villains at least. And if all goes well, we may see another Fiendship as Magic series or something else of that nature in the future. But for now, why don't we start with the first featured villain, King Sombra. Go ahead and give the good folks a brief summary, Toon.
In our first issue, Twilight finds a journal within the Crystal Empire that apparently belonged to Sombra. We explore how Sombra came to power and how at first he was the child of a big old crystal. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, I guess. So he was just born this way. Through a series of events, Sombra grows up unable to get near the Crystal Heart during the Crystal Fair as it hurts him and weakens him, and we learn that Sombra's true destiny is to destroy the Crystal Heart, raise an army of shadows, and become king. Which he's able to do when he straight up murders Princess Amore. And, well, the rest is history.
The thing here is that Sombra, at first, didn't want that kind of life for himself. While his foalhood was pretty rough in the beginning, and being the new kid who couldn't read on the first day of school could do that to a colt, he was able to find solace with Chestnut Falls, the mayor running the local orphanage, and the maternal figure for most of his life, and the young filly named Radiant Hope, who helps to make him feel not as lonely in school. The real appeal this story had for me was the tragic aspect of it. When Sombra first sees a glimpse of what was hidden in his heart, he immediately rejected it, not wanting to be that kind of pony. But as the years went by, both the pain and the temptation grew to unbearable levels, and with Radiant Hope eventually finding her talent and making plans to study abroad, those past feelings of loneliness drove him to make the decision to embrace his dark nature.
I'm actually really impressed as to how they handled Sombra's rise in this issue. Sombra didn't even know he was a villain, and there was a chance for him to actually live a normal life, a life without darkness. There's a level of sympathy you wouldn't expect, especially with Amore's advice, in that despite a vision he's had, he has the power to change his future. Not many villains are given this chance or choice before it all goes downhill. We also get a little world building and the discovery of the Umbrum species and its army, ponies made of smoke and shadows. It's tragic to see a character turn villain when he could turn the other way, but this sort of evil is unfortunately necessary.
One thing that I wasn't too fond of was the concept of Sombra's biological mother. After Sombra runs off to the frozen wasteland in the third act of the story, he comes across a pile of dormant crystals that speaks to him and claims that she is his mother, and tells him what he really is and what he's meant to do. I just couldn't get behind the whole her being a crystal thing because it's not really explained why she was like that, and she could have appeared in the form of a shadow or something since that would make sense with the lore that they were trying to introduce with the Umbrum. Thankfully, my discomfort with that was overshadowed by the things that I liked about this issue. I like that Sombra chose to be evil not because of a desire to be evil, but because of a desire to not get killed by a magical heart. It wasn't until after he killed Amore that he fully embraced his dark side. This issue was a great way to start the Fiendship series, and it's definitely one of the standouts. Also, Princess Amore is bae.
More like Shattered Bay.
You sure know how to kill a brother's dreams.
It's on my business card.
In issue number 2, we get to see the backstory of our favorite centaur and how he became the power-hungry baddie that we saw at the end of FIM's 4th season.
For those that don't know, ToonKriticY was a G1 villain that got rebooted in G4 to be one of the most badass, formidable, and dangerous foes the main six has ever faced, going so far as to steal power from unicorns, Pegasi, and earth ponies all over Equestria, and, well, becomes an all-powerful god. He even steals Discord's power. So, now we get the backstory.
As a teenager, ToonKriticY didn't feel like his father, King Vorak, recognized his magical talent, so he frequently goes behind his back to learn magic from Sendak, an elderly centaur with some shady practices. ToonKriticY's younger brother Scorpan tags along as well, and it's clear that while he doesn't like what his big bro's doing, he follows him around just to make sure that he doesn't get into too much trouble. Think of Simon from Alvin and the Chipmunks, only with Theodore's personality and rotund physique.
And less likable.
Speak for yourself. Anyway, Sendak reveals to ToonKriticY that he's brought back a unicorn from Equestria with the intention of absorbing his magic. After ToonKriticY tries and fails to do it himself, the unicorn escapes and King Vorak leaves to go do damage control with Princess Celestia. Scorpan gives ToonKriticY an alibi, helping his big bro get off clean, but ToonKriticY vows that he will overthrow his father and take his rightful place as ruler.
To do what else? Take over Equestria.
Of course!
So, what were your thoughts on this issue, Toon?
As hyped as I was after Twilight's Kingdom to see more of ToonKriticY's backstory, I felt like there could have been a little bit more in this issue. ToonKriticY is portrayed as a rebellious teenager and a bit of a bratty punk, displaying the typical tropes you would see of the royal figure who don't need no rules. It's clear right off the bat ToonKriticY is evil, and the way the comic ends, well, okay, picture this. You have the beginning, middle, and the end, with the comic being the beginning. Twilight's Kingdom is the end, so what's the middle? There's this whole middle that could have been explored, and I think the comic could have delved a little further, so what happens in between, that just raises a whole bunch of questions. I did like this comic, though, nitpicks aside. It was interesting to see the seeds plant themselves for what will happen to ToonKriticY.
I'm right there with you on both your praises and your concerns. When you compare this issue to Sombra's, the latter builds a bridge between its story and the story we were told in the Crystal Empire. But this issue just leaves a huge gap, with the only way to cross being the rickety bridge known as headcanon. The ending was so sudden that I thought my copy of the issue had missing pages. Out of all the stories in this series, this is the one that absolutely needed a second part. However, when I look at the content that we did get, I was entertained. I particularly enjoyed the familial relations within ToonKriticY and his relatives, with him being a lot like his father and Scorpan taking after his mother both in looks and in personality.
That's where we see some character for him. I thought the supporting cast was a bit lacking, but ToonKriticY brings a little bit of life to them.
I disagree. From the beginning, I got this vibe from Scorpan that while he wasn't supportive of his brother's decisions, he still sticks by him out of loyalty and hope that he'll come around. I also like the differences between King Vorak and Sendak the Elder. The former was ToonKriticY's true father, but didn't support him like one, while the latter wasn't the best guy to look up to, but he still gave ToonKriticY that encouragement that his father never did.
Well, at least we can agree that Fleck's work on this issue was superb. The designs, the backgrounds, all of that was great.
The art for the issue was also the best that Tony Fleeks has ever done, and if we ever visit this setting again, I hope that he does the art for it. And Queen Hadon for Best Mother. Look at how adorable that is. So yeah, good issue, but it felt a little incomplete.
Next up, issue 3. Here's one for one of the recent villains in the series, Adagio, Aria, and Sonata the Sirens. Finally, an epic backstory for the trio that knew just how to pull the strings and get everyone to fall under their control. These three were able to almost win if Twilight had not been there to stop them.
Yay.
Well, they must have gotten something great, right? What?
My expectations for this issue weren't nearly as high as yours. Yeah, the Sirens were cool villains in Rainbow Rocks, but I was the least excited for this issue out of all the others. Plus, I knew that this issue was going to be handled by Ted Anderson and Agnes Garboska, so I knew from the get-go that we weren't going to be getting an epic backstory for these girls. And to be honest, with villains like them, I don't think a story with that kind of tone would fit them anyway.
Hey, Sketchy, remember when everyone was clamoring and begging for MLP to introduce sea ponies as interactable characters in the series?
A little, but I wasn't one of those people.
You would think people would be more interested in the series giving us that, and that they would perhaps take advantage as to how their world works, what made them become the way they did, etc., etc. So allow me to go back to the beginning, middle, and end thing. This issue is the middle. Rainbow Rocks is the end. So where's the beginning? Where's their actual backstory? My biggest complaint is that while it is trying to be funny, throwing in a few pop culture jokes with the music, the idea sounded good on paper, but what we got was honestly disappointing. Like the past issue, there's so much more they could have delved into, like perhaps why they wanted to be evil, where there are more sirens, do they even have a reason other than being evil for the sake of, well, being evil? We already knew this.
I'd have to disagree with you there, Toon. While I will admit that part of the reason why I wasn't disappointed with this issue was because I already had low expectations going into it, I'm actually glad that it took a comedic route. I don't think I'd be able to take the story seriously if it went in the same direction as the last two issues. It may just be me, but I don't feel that type of story seems to suit them. Also, I don't think every villain needs to have a backstory or a reason to be evil. Like another villain that we'll discuss later, some baddies are evil just because they're evil.
Well, here's the thing. I don't dislike this comic. I do think some parts give me a chuckle here and there, so this definitely isn't a bad comic. But out of the 5, this is probably the weakest. We got more characterization in the movie than here. It's a missed opportunity, and I think they could have told us another part of their story other than the one we already know.
While I definitely wouldn't go back and read this issue again, I don't think it was the weakest. Unless my 5th grade history class has failed me, sirens originated from Greek mythology, and the story structure reminded me a lot of the Greek myths that I read in school. It gives a supernatural cause to a natural occurrence. In the case of this comic, the natural occurrence was the development of modern music genres, and the supernatural cause was the musical battle between the Sirens and Star Swirl. So while it's not the best story, I'll give it points for embracing the cultural roots of its characters. Plus, it portrayed the Sirens as a group rather than Adagio and her two sidekicks. So I guess that while there is a conflict of opinion on how this comic was handled, I think we can both agree that this was a skippable issue.
Yeah, skip it. All they needed to do was introduce dubstep, and they probably would have won the whole thing. But I gotta say, rapping Star Swirl, put him and Pinky together, and you have a new sensation. 11 out of 10, with Will Smith again.
Ugh, Pinkie Pie rapping? I'd rather listen to Iggy Azalea freestyle. Nope, not apologizing for that. I'll let you take this one, Toon, cause I just can't with this one.
What? Dude, it's Nightmare Moon. Probably the most iconic out of all the villains. Look, just from the description here, there should be something incredible. Perhaps it's a psychological tale of how Nightmare Moon descends into madness alone on the moon. Or maybe there's some kind of secret journal on how Luna just breaks down. Or maybe there's none of that, is there?
Bingo.
Ah, damn it. Okay, so when does this take place? It starts right after Nightmare Moon lands on the moon. It's a chronicle of her time during her banishment. While it did give some insight as to where the moon creatures from the Nightmare Rarity arc came from, and it gave an origin to Luna's dreamwalking abilities, the rest is just a little confusing. Right after getting banished for the first time, Luna finds this dream-making factory. Well, that's pretty cool, and so Nightmare Moon works on manipulating, corrupting, and making the Dream Factory a Nightmare Factory. Her plan starts off pretty cool, until she gets a roadblock in trying to invade Celestia's dream. And, yeah, she's right back to square one. Bring up the beginning, middle, and end thing again.
I think the problem with this story was that it tried to pack too much into a small window of opportunity. Considering the limitations of both the setting and the length of the issue, the story that it was going for was way too ambitious. Because of that, the story rushes itself to fit within a 30-page time frame. I mean, T-Rex story was too long for a single issue as well, and having it get cut off at the end was disappointing, but I'd much rather have that than an attempt to stuff everything into one issue. It makes me wonder why the story didn't take place before Luna's descent. There was a lot more existing material to build off of, both with Luna herself and her relationships with the other characters. But I shouldn't talk about what the story could have been and instead judge what we have.
I agree. This comic should have shown the side that we wanted to see, how Luna felt and became Nightmare Moon. While I do find it good that this comic does answer a few questions about the Knicks and how Luna corrupted them, it opens up yet another series of questions, and that's not pleasant. So, let's see. I do like how Nightmare Moon was portrayed on this. Nightmare Moon is one of my favorite villains in the series, and if this comic got anything right, they got it right here.
I did like Nightmare Moon's snarky demeanor in this issue, but what I didn't like was how she seemed indifferent to the fact that she was just banished to the moon, like it wasn't a big deal to her. Considering how badly she wanted to overthrow Celestia, one would assume that she'd be a wee bit upset about that. Also, what was up with Doran? I mean, I get that she was naive and didn't know about Nightmare Moon using her, but you'd think that she'd realize the harm she was causing after seeing that she had helped Nightmare Moon start a riot. And this goes back to the problem of the story being rushed. Because we go through the events so fast, the characters aren't given time to react to the situations they're in. That whole riot scene, it started and ended in less than 2 pages. And the way Celestia stops it is really arbitrary and never explained. The story just felt like a rough draft for a longer arc, and it just went through the motions without putting weight behind, well, anything.
I have to give credit, though, for the plan. The plan was really good. You can invade other people's dreams, corrupt them into making them think someone's evil and they should be taken down, and then have everyone else go nuts because of total chaos, mass hysteria, and insane delusions. This was like the best plan. You take this one step further and you could have some Freddy Krueger shenanigans that could have people dying in their sleep. Think of how awesome this would be. And I think, actually, they may be doing this at the end of the comic. So there's hopes, I guess. But back to the comic. There was a major lack of characterization for the Knicks, and they didn't really get any until the Nightmare Rarity arc. For a prequel to said arc, perhaps the introduction could have been done a little better?
I honestly don't know. Perhaps a simpler storyline could have worked better and allowed for more natural pacing. Either that or set the story before Luna's banishment and have the Knicks play a small cameo that briefly explains where they came from. While I can appreciate what this issue tried to do, it was still trying to do too much, and the story ended up falling flat as a result. And the major downgrade in Tony Fleeks's art didn't help either. For me, this was without a doubt the weakest issue in the series.
I disagree. The Sirens one was a little weaker than this, and at least with this one we learned something a little new.
It seems we are at an impasse. I suggest we move on to the next issue before things get ugly around here. Don't want to make a mess. I think I'll take this one, Toon. Queen Chrysalis. Where do I begin with her? Do I start with her amazing design, her near-flawless voice acting, her iconic appearances in both the show and the comics? I just don't know. Bottom line, she's my all-time favorite villain in the series, and out of all the villains in MLP, she was the one that deserved an established backstory the most. This could also be a double-edged sword, though. Since she has practically no backstory and she was introduced to the show over 3 years ago, fans have spent those 3 years building headcanons on both her and her species, and it was only a matter of time before those headcanons got nuked, which was the reason why I did all my reviews for this series in a bomb shelter. Still, I was really excited for this issue, as it was done by Katie Cook and Andy Price, my favorite IDW duo, and I'm happy to say that they did not disappoint with this one.
Just in the first few pages, I was surprised to see that it is a sequel to the Changeling Revenge arc from the first ever arc of the comics. How interesting to see we come full circle.
In this issue, Twilight goes to visit the Queen in the same castle we saw her at the end of the Return of Queen Chrysalis arc. She also brought her friends along, for literally no reason, but I'll get to that later, and after a slight banter with Chrissy, we're shown 4 stories from her past, with each tale revealing a little bit more about her and her changelings.
Huzzah! A sequel and backstory in one issue. Now this is what I'm talking about, even though it's a little vague. Heck, we even got backstories as far as to how Chrysalis came to be, and to top it all off, the reason as to why Chrissy is even evil to begin with, she was simply born that way. Is it cliche? Yes. Does it bug me? Surprisingly not. She's come a long way since the Canterlot wedding, and every little bit then on has made things more interesting.
Told you, man. Some villains don't need a reason to be evil. On their own, the things we learn about Chrysalis and the Changelings are small, but when you look at all those little pieces together, they add up to a lot of info. We see how Chrysalis looked before she got all those holes, how she became a queen, and many more little details.
They present Chrysalis in like a Hannibal Lecter sort of style prison, and it's intriguing they chose this because out of all the villains, I think Chrysalis is the most deceptive and probably most sadistic out of the villains in the main series. She played Twilight like a fiddle and even managed to escape, giving Twilight the slip. One can only imagine the fallout talk with Celestia at this point. Some ponies in trouble. This was great, having Sombra and Chrysalis bookend this series because you start out on a strong note and you end on a strong note. With this miniseries, I wonder if they're leading up to, say, a Sombra and Chrysalis team up for the main six to face, since Sombra is apparently alive?
Well, I don't know about Sombra, but Andy Price has stated that he and Katie Cook are really interested in Chrysalis's character, and that they deliberately left stuff out of this issue because they plan on doing more with Chrysalis in the future. However, this issue wasn't perfect. I mentioned before that the rest of the main six tag along with Twilight when she goes to visit Chrissy, and I can't think of any possible reason for them to be there. I mean, they don't have the elements of harmony anymore, so it's not like they can contribute much if things go south. They pretty much did nothing but provide comic relief, which, while very funny, ended up distracting from the main plot. Rarity even goes on a one-page tangent about a date she had, and it had nothing to do with what was going on.
Rarity goes on dates since when?
Was it funny? Yes. Was it necessary or relevant? Absolutely not. Having it be just Twilight and Chrysalis and maybe Spike since he was the one that asked about Chrysalis's past, the air would have been a lot tenser and made for a better atmosphere. Still, even with that in mind, the comic was still very enjoyable, and if that's the most I can say about its negatives, I'm happy.
Fiendship as Magic started off strong and slumped in the middle, but pulled itself around and went with a high note on both ends to deliver a satisfying miniseries that's actually worked out a lot better than I thought. I've always loved delving into what makes a villain more so than what makes a hero. Each of these stories highlighted the best traits of the villains, and did world building in some issues, and went through different periods in time throughout the series to explore and expand on bits of the lore. In order of best to worst, I rank it Sombra, Chrysalis, Nightmare Moon, Tyrek, and the Sirens.
I'll go from worst to best. For me, it was Nightmare Moon, the Sirens, Tyrek, and... this was a hard decision. I mean, Chrysalis is my favorite villain, but Sombra's story made me actually care about him as a character, and prior to reading the issue, he was my least favorite villain. Chrysalis's story served as an amazing first part to an ongoing arc, but it's only fair to judge this as a single issue just like the rest of the stories in this series, and because of that, I gotta give it to Sombra. He really impressed me. Don't worry, Chrissy, I still love ya.
Do you recommend this series, Sketchy?
Without a doubt. There's a lot of good stuff here, and fans will be doing themselves a disservice if they passed on this series. Although, they can just skip the Nightmare Moon issue, cause it was... no. Just no.
Oh, I can honestly recommend the Sombra and Chrysalis issues, and the other three I can't really say yes to, but if people want to check it out, then it's worth looking into. The whole series is great, but the bookends are the best and are in my top favorite MLP issues of all the times.
Same here. I really hope we get to visit some of these villains again since the comics have the leeway to go a little bit darker than the TV show can.
Yeah, it's a shame they aren't canon.
Well, actually they're B-canon, which means that the comics will have to follow the show, but the show doesn't have to follow the comics, but that's a topic for another day. Anyways, thanks for having me here, Toon. No hard feelings for the whole brony curious disguise thing, right? Right?
Oh no, you were fine. Up until you turned into me. And there's only one me that knows me better than me, and that is me, the cult of personality.
Oh yeah, you're so charismatic.
Yeah, then who's more charismatic than me? 5 seconds or your ass is grass.
I regret nothing. Oh, and don't forget, keep it sketchy, folks.
The only sketchy thing will be what's left of you in pieces, you changeling son of a bitch.